Chapter 14, An Old Flame. Emma hadn't planned on visiting Harlem on this particular day. She'd spent the afternoon in a midtown office building in a board meeting for an athletic apparel company she and Omar had invested in years before. The investment had proved to be a wise choice, and the brand was beloved by pro athletes and young people all around the world. But the CEO, Logan Hinkle, was Emma's least favorite kind of millennial. He was white, privileged, quoted Drake and Lil Wayne with the same aplomb that he name-dropped LeBron James and Steph Curry. Yet he had filled the board with friends from his years in the bastions of white privilege. The board represented a mix of Hinkle pals from boarding school, Harvard, and McKinsey, where he had spent the early part of his career. Emma was the only person of color on the board, which, given the landscape of the country and the brand's clients, made no kind of sense. Connor Hamilton, the company's founder, had been an old friend of Omar's, and Emma had taken the board seat after her husband's passing. But after a 4-hour marathon of rich boy bromancing and precious little innovation, Emma had had enough. She vowed to talk to Connor and remind him that diversity was good for all businesses, but especially important for a youth-focused retail brand influenced by Black culture, which had seen its market's share slip considerably recently. She walked out of the East Side Tower to see that her driver, Virgil, was waiting for her. Billy had spoken to her about the environmental impact of keeping a car and driver in the city. "Your carbon footprint is off the hook, Emma," Billy had said the last time she had come over. "The car, the G5, none of this is sustainable." But Emma was 66 years young. She'd come a long way from Louisiana and red state politics. She wanted to be part of the solution when it came to global issues, but she was more than a little put off that just when she had acquired financial wealth, she was being told to dial it back for the good of the planet. It reminded her of all the hullabaloo around fur coats and a few years back. Just when Black women could finally afford to have that luxurious, glamorous coat, it was declared cruel and out of fashion. Didn't matter if you bought a vintage one. All of a sudden, this thing she'd craved her entire young life was déclassé. When she first moved to New York, you couldn't open a magazine without seeing those ads. What becomes a legend most? And there would be a photo of the most beautiful woman in the world, wearing nothing but a sexy fur coat. She could close her eyes and still see Diana Ross rocking an exquisite bob, her eyelashes curled just so, her plum-colored lips brightened in a cat who ate the canary smile. She turned that picture out of the magazine, pinned it to the bulletin board near her desk, and covered it with a securities regulation memo. But it was always there for her to peek at anytime she wanted. Everybody was in those ads. Everybody. Faye Dunaway and Lauren Bacall, Elizabeth Taylor, and Bianca Jagger. One Christmas in the late 80s, Omar surprised her with the mink of her dreams. And just to show that the man knew her better than she knew herself, he'd had a custom wrapping paper fashioned out of the old Diana Ross Black Glamour ads. Just seeing the paper made her smile. Omar never did things halfway. Everything about the careful way he presented himself and the things he gave was a gift. She still remembers walking out of her office building one winter day 5 years later. Virgil had just started driving her, and the expression on his face was what cued her to turn and see the young blonde woman just as she tossed a bucket of red paint onto Emma's coat. "Murderer!" the girl had screamed. "Monster!" Virgil raced over, cloaked Emma in his arms, slipped the coat off her shoulders, and slid her into the back seat of the car in one smooth superhero sequence. That night at dinner, she and Omar decided she would have to retire her coat. But damn it if it didn't seem that certain people got to be dramatic while others always had to keep things buttoned up. How many black kids are killed in the city every year? She asked Omar. What would happen to me if I stood outside the police commissioner's office or the mayor's office and threw a bucket of red paint on police officers screaming, "Murderer! Monster!" Omar shook his head and smiled wryly. They'd lock your black ass up, Emma. Exactly, she said. Everybody and everything has a champion except black people. We've been turning the other cheek for more than 300 years. And the one thing we're never supposed to do is express our outrage. I wouldn't mind all of these protests if I could take to the streets and scream and holler about all the dastardly deeds that have been committed against my people. Sitting in the back seat of the Porsche hybrid she had purchased at Billy's suggestion, Emma wished she could go home and talk to Omar about the trifling board meeting she'd just attended. What she missed more than anything was her evening conversations with Omar. Somehow, sitting across from her husband in their kitchen, Oscar Peterson playing through the speakers, each of them sipping a beautiful glass of Argentinian Malbec, it felt like they could conquer anything. Life was a giant puzzle that they took apart and put together each night. With Omar by her side, the pieces always fit, even if they had to jam them in there. Now he was gone, and there were figurative buckets of red paint headed her way. She could feel it, and there was nothing for her to do but stand and face them alone. On a whim, Emma asked Virgil to drive her to Harlem. She didn't want to go home, not yet. She decided to go up to Lido, her favorite Italian restaurant. The place was packed, but she found a seat at the bar. She ate solo at the bar often in the years since Omar had passed. It made her feel a little less alone. She was sitting at the bar, sipping a lovely Cabernet and perusing the menu when someone sat down next to her. She turned and was surprised to see a face she had not seen in decades. "Amelia Vo," he said, chuckling. He always chuckled when he said her full name. She smiled back and said, "Carter Morris, as I live and breathe." Everything about